I'm Juliet, and I'm going to be talking about how to create scenes for your AMVs. And I want to address the biggest challenge when it comes to creating a scene, and that's how to fill space. So I'm going to be going over my personal steps on how I approach creating a scene and how I decide to fill it. So let's pretend we have a completely empty scene and we're going to, start from scratch, black screen. I like to start, I have to break it into two different steps. First, you have the focus of your scene, and then you have the details that surround it. For the focus of your scene, it doesn't always have to be a render. It can be text, it can be an object. Yeah, it doesn't have to always be a picture of your character. And when I say render, I just mean art of the character that you're using. And I approach this in two different ways. So first what I do is I'll listen to the lyrics, and if something in the lyric jumps out at me and I'm like, oh, this would be cool to make a scene, I'll go from there. But if I don't have a particular idea, just based off of the lyrics, I'll start, just go through my art folder, see what I like. And you want to pick art that fits the tone of the song and the theme of the song if possible. Like if it's, a dark song, you want to use more edgy art or sad art, or, if it's more of a spicy song, you want to use art that's a little more, spicy. And so once you've got that, you've got your art, you can place down your typography, but you don't want to just straight up stop there. You want to add details, and these are just things for your viewer to look at. So it's not just straight up a render and a text. You want to kind of avoid that. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not as interesting. And you want to make things that are interesting for the viewer to look at, right? When it comes to details are the harder part, I think, because you have to try and think of things that are going to convey something, and it requires more brain power. I think there's 4 main ways to do this. The first one, and these aren't in any particular order, but lyrics, I think conveying the lyrics is the most important part of your edit. It's very impressive when you watch an edit and you see someone created a scene that just matches the lyrics. And also, your lyrics are different than the lyrics of other parts for the most part, unless it's like a chorus part or like a repeating lyric. But for the most part, they're going to be different. And because they're different, you can come up with scenes that are going to look different than other people's scenes, which means that your part is going to stand out, which is what you want. You want to stand out. So I have, as an example of this, I've got a part I did for a friend's birthday, and the lyric was attached. I was just like, okay, attached. So I want to have the two characters, and they're kind of connected to each other somehow. So I looked through all my art and I found this one of them back to back, and I was like, oh, it was cool if I could have some kind of goo connecting them, because the theme was very wavy. So I was like, okay, so we'll have something connecting them, and then at the top I've got this dotted line, and you kind of see those lines to show that two things are connected. Then the lyric is part of the bigger lyric, and the bigger lyric here was please don't get attached, something like that. Please don't get attached. And I was like, okay, so they don't really want to be attached. So I have this pair of scissors, and it's cutting through the attachment. And then I have that X at the top, because that's kind of to signify that, okay, the connection is cut off. And then I have some X's on the edges just to go with that. That's for lyrics. Moving on to our next one, we have the theme. For the most part, every MEP has a theme, or it should. And you want to pick elements that are going to convey that theme. For example, if you have a techno theme, you might want to do loading bars or have aiming scopes or a computer mouse cursor. Or if you have a paper theme, you might want to put sketch doodles or paper textures. And the example I have for that is my Slave for You sign up. And the theme for that was Greek. It was supposed to be a Greek themed project. To convey that, at the top I have these patterns, which you see commonly on Greek pottery. And then I have these leaves, and you see that a lot in their sculptures and just in all their art. Then I have these symbols that are kind of supposed to be the Greek letters. So I have all these things, and that's the point, is to convey that it's a Greek theme, so the audience gets that. And that's a really good way to fill space. Next, we have the media and the character. I think this is a really cool one. So you can use symbols, like say the logo of the game or little images that you see in the game a lot. You can also do objects that the character holds, or they own it, or they interact with it in the story, or lore related things, which I think is particularly cool, especially if you're a fan of that media and you like see it. It's like, oh, that's like, it's like the stuff from the show, and that's, it's cool for them. For my example for that, I have my part for Paradise Circus, a screenshot, and it's the character Madatsuki from the game Yumaniki. And if you're not familiar with that game, the plot of it is plays this girl and she has a dream diary and she writes in her diary and she kind of goes and explores her dreams. To convey that, I have the dream diary at the bottom. I just have some text written in it, so like she's writing in this diary. And then in the top corner, on the left, I have like a dream bubble to be like, okay, she's dreaming, and that was what, that's related to the character, and so it's a good way to fill space. So for the next one, this is more like specific if you have a particular scene in mind, like you have I don't want to say a gimmick, but kind of something you want to like convey. And it's really cool when people do this. But so for example here, I've got this scene from my fairy tale part, and it's the characters, they're kind of popping out of this pop-up book because it's called Fairy Tale, the song, and I was like, okay, so it's like a fairy tale book, and so it can like pop up stuff. I thought that would be cool. So to convey that, I have some trees coming out of the book. I have the wood on the floor, so it's like a book is like resting on a table. I've got a bookshelf in the background because I like to think that they just pulled the book off that bookshelf. I've got my typography, behind my typography, I have some kind of cutouts, so it's like, ransom e-text, which is like goes to that paper theme. And then I have newspaper textures on the shapes behind the text, and I have it on my trees, and I have it also on the render itself. So that's a really good way to fill space and also let the viewer know what's supposed to be happening in this scene. And you just basically want to be purposeful with all the things that you put in the scene. You don't want to just place things down. You want to kind of have a reason to it, and also when you have a reason for things, it's easier to come up with stuff. So they kind of go hand in hand. So, it's going to be purposeful. For example, here I have another scene from my fairy tale part, right? So first we've got the focus of the scene, which is the book, and it's the MVP is called Fairy Tale. So I've got the text there. It says Fairy Tale. And then I have a shape on the book and a border around the cover of the book so that it's apparent that it's like, okay, this is like a book cover, it's fancy. And then on the right and the left, I have sheets of paper, and I like to think that you're reading this book and maybe you were drawing the characters from the book. And so I've got the characters that I edited with in the part, and this also ties it in with the entire part. And we've got thanks for watching written down. And then on the right, we have a song by Taylor Swift. Just to balance out, the left side of the composition has something on it. I think I should put some text on the right too, just to kind of balance that out. Then I've got some doodles on the bottom of the paper, just because, like someone's doodling on the paper. And I also have a crumpled up paper ball and a pencil on the right. So the pencil there was like, okay, if she's writing on all of this, you would need some way to write that down. So I've got the pencil, and then to balance that out on the left, I have this paper ball because there's paper laying around. Maybe she crumbled it up. Then on the top left and the bottom right, I have these leaf shapes. It's like a mystical theme, like it was supposed to be very fantastical and atmospheric. So I wanted to like put those in there. And then the background is wood because I'm just like, okay, the book could be on a table. So that's what I was going for. Right. So you want to be purposeful with everything, right? But say you thought about it, you sat back in the program for a good couple hours and you're not sure what else to put. You gotta have last resort things, things that you resort to. And for me, it's always X's. I love X's. I think they look so cool. You can do plus signs. You can do anything kind of generic. I like to do flowers because I think flowers are cool. They're pretty. But you want to try and, if possible, fit these generic things that you do to the theme. So if you use X's, you want to try and write them in a font that's going to fit the theme. So if it's like kind of grungy, you might want to use like a scribbly font. Or if you're doing like a techno type of theme, you might want to do like a pixel font for the X. So you want to really try, and everything should come back to conveying the theme or the lyrics. And it's not necessarily bad if you have to put something generic in. Like sometimes you just have to fill space because having nothing there can feel more awkward than if you had something there that like was subtle. X's are good for that. Moving on, before I talk about the resource pack, there's textures. I love textures. I think textures look really nice. They're really good to fill big empty spaces in your compositions. And they can be really good if you have a gritty theme. They help with grunge, and I just think they look really nice. Then you have backgrounds. Backgrounds can be hard for some people. Personally, I like to avoid black backgrounds, like solid black backgrounds, because I don't think they look that interesting. And also, when you have something in your program and you haven't put anything down yet, it's just black, so it just really feels like it's completely empty. So to avoid that, I go for a dark blue or maybe a dark pink, like a magenta kind of color. Or if it's white, you don't want to do solid white, you want to go for like an off-white. And then you want to also avoid straight up solid backgrounds because that doesn't look that interesting. I like to go for gradients, and then I like to add subtle patterns or some textures. And you want to keep these subtle because they're in the background. To conclude, to make this easier, I am going to be uploading my resource pack so that everybody can download it. And I think I started it back in like 6 years ago, so it's got a lot of stuff in it. First, we have the backgrounds. And 90s backgrounds, these are good specifically for that theme. Fancy ones, good for fancy themes. Grunge, good for grunge themes. You've got patterns, this is a whole bunch of different patterns. Rays, I don't normally use rays, like I don't just put it down, I'm like that's the background. I kind of use it to create like a ray effect, to kind of put focus on a character. Then we've got real life backgrounds, this is good for brick walls or different textures. I've got techno, good for techno themes. And then transparent, and these are just things that you know, they're transparent. So those are all my backgrounds. Then I have blood. I have a lot of paint splatters because I love paint splatters. I think they look cool, and everybody else, you know, likes to just put them around, so I have a whole bunch of them. And it's good to have variety in your paint splatters. If you use the same paint splatter in the scene, so if you have two of the same paint splatters, like people can kind of tell. It looks a little awkward, so you want to kind of have some variety. Feels more natural that way. Then we have clip art, and this is all shapes, whole bunch of things you can put down. And for clip art and art, when you put in shapes, you don't want to just put them in as is. I recommend putting a fill effect, or if you're on Sony Vegas, put a sepia effect. Set it to 100%, especially if it has like some crunchy white edges to it. Looks cleaner that way. Then I have flares. Flares are a really good lighting effect. You can put them, drop them in, set them to an add layer. I'm going to probably do something on atmosphere, and these are really good for atmosphere. Then we have real life backgrounds. Real life backgrounds are good for scenery, themes. You can put them in, just put a blur on the background. And then I have real life objects, and this is organized into several different sections here. Zoom in. And then my textures folder. I have a lot of textures. I love textures. They look really good. I'll probably do a whole video on how to use textures and why you should use textures because I am an advertiser for textures. They look so good. So that's my whole resource pack, and I recommend downloading it. And I recommend not using it in a way where you always get things from it, because there's a lot of stuff in there, and I know where everything is in it because I've made it and I've used it a million times. So I know where everything is, but it can be very overwhelming to see this whole thing of resource, and it's like, oh my god, I don't know where to begin. So I recommend looking for your own stuff, and then if you can't come up with any ideas, just go through the folder and look through stuff and be like, oh, like this, I like this shape, this is cool, we could put this in. Or maybe it might give you the idea that you like that shape, but you want to look for like an alternate version on Google or something. So yeah, that is the explanation for the resource pack. I'm going to be creating a similar video for overlays and a similar one for fonts. So thank you so much for watching. Hope this was helpful to you. Please leave a comment or just give me some feedback and how you felt about it if it was helpful. And I hope you have a good day.